welcome aboard the Workplace Whiz, your audio gateway to the modern workplace. We designed this podcast as the place to discuss strategies, the best practices, and share industry insights with our expert guests. This program is brought to you by Yarooms, the workplace experience platform empowering sustainable companies. I am Cosmin Patlageanu, marketing professional and published author. Today we're discussing human-centric workplaces, workplace culture, what does change mean in the context of the new workplace, and who is or should be the driver for that change. With me I have Simone Fenton-Jarvis, workplace consultant, agent of change, published author, among other things. There are some nice acronyms to go with the titles as well. MBA, FY, WFM, just to name a few. Welcome, Simone, and it's fantastic to have you on our podcast.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Now, to understand the workplace experience overall, we need to look a little bit of maybe at the experience economy we're kind of living in right now. And I think it's important for us to understand that the experiences are not just limited to the industries focused on everyday customers, like end customers, because the demand for exceptional experiences is just as important in the corporate world. And to make it a little bit more complicated, sort of every workplace is a microcosm where the broader experience economy is important as well, because the employee interactions, satisfaction, engagement, all these impact the success and the effectiveness as businesses overall. Now, how did we get here? And I think a little bit of history is important. We kind of evolved from a utility-based work sort of relationship towards having employee experiences as our main focuses these days, and their well-being as well. When it started like decades ago, it was purely utilitarian. So employees had vacancies to fill, people needed the money, and that was all, right? The only tools or the resources the employees had were basically the desks, the chairs, whatever tools they needed to perform or fulfill the jobs. Probably wellness programs or flexible work back then was utter nonsense, right? Then we had the productivity age when it was all about improving the performance. And of course, we didn't have the robots or the automations or the machines that we have today. And people were doing all the work. We had a little bit of improvements here and there, right? So just to help you get your job done quicker or have more of the stuff that you were building faster. But the focus wasn't on creating the workplace as a place or a space where employees really enjoyed being. Then we had engagement, which was completely revolutionary. And they put employee well-being over productivity many times. And it made organizations consider what can they do basically to improve employees' wellness and understand how they can improve the processes and, of course, improve their work overall. Now, obviously, some people kind of confuse engagement and employee experience, and they consider that they are basically the same thing. But I do think that they kind of complement each other. While engagement is a short-term focus or initiative, then the experience is something that is encompassing like the whole relationship, and it's basically what stands on like the foundation of long-term cultural changes and organizational redesign, which is something that you are very familiar with, right? So, and this brings us basically to the most important and kind of actual the experience era, and it's all about creating those workplaces where people actually want to be in. And to achieve this, we all have to connect a little bit of everything, right? The experience means basically the people, the spaces, the technology, using that technology that we have, data analytics or analysis sometimes, and obviously the leaders, the managers that understand how to put everything together, which might be tricky. So we've come a long way, right? But it's far from done. We can't say we're there yet. Speaking of the history of work, UiPath has this fantastic video. I'm not sure if you watched it, on the history of work, and if you haven't, it's a must. It's absolutely hilarious. It kind of addresses the substance of how things have evolved since the Stone Age, right? Now, getting back to the main topic, what's workplace experience? Who creates it and who owns it?
Yeah. I guess it's an interesting question because when you think about workplace experience, traditionally, I would say it has been focused around the physical space, and then it gets back into then facilities managers that are then owning that space. I think the pandemic obviously turned things on its head a little bit. HR are now, a massive player in not just the employee experience but the workplace experience. And rightly so. They should have always been in the shed. And I think that mix of IT, facilities, HR. I don't think there is one owner. It's got to be all three, because you could say HR from a culture point of view, you could say facilities from the space and what the physical kind of the processes are and getting in and out of the building as an example. But then you could then say IT, you only need IT to go wrong and your experience is ruined. So it's got to be a mix of all of them three people and departments to really get the experience right.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there is a shift, right? I don't think it was that visible prior to the pandemic, but it accelerated stuff. And,
Yeah.
I really like that point, that if something goes wrong, then you obviously understand how important IT is in the middle of things, right? How they keep things connected and together. Because technology is something that we use every day, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Speaking of which, yeah. Yeah, please go ahead.
You said, yeah, one of my previous roles, I was responsible for that workplace experience, bringing them three departments together. And I think the crucial thing that we very soon realized was, me as traditionally facilities, you have to be best friends with HR and IT, because otherwise facilities can't even do your job either. So it's a very much, it's this symbiotic kind of system between them three departments that you need to get it right.
No, absolutely. Well, now the question is, where do we experience the workplace experience? I mean, is it something that's only inside the walls of an office? Does it go beyond that? I mean, if I'm working from home, should I be part of that workplace experience as well?
Yeah, I think, you should. I think the workplace for me is, from the moment that someone turns their laptop on in the morning to closing it off in the evening, it is all of them touch points. And that could be working from home, and the workplace experience would be, what technology has been provided to you by your organization to do your job. What tools do you use to share documents? How do you connect on video? That is part of the workplace experience. And then when you go, let's say you're going working on a train, what is that experience? Is your laptop even suitable for carrying on a train? How many organizations expect people to move up and down the country on trains, but then give them a laptop that weighs like 30 kilograms? So it's got to be, what happened there? It's got to be that experience is literally everything that touches the employee in their journey. And then going into an office, what is them points there? Is it easy for them to get a good coffee and to go and work at a space that is relevant? So yeah, it's really, really wide, and I think too many have got hooked on the workplace being the physical office, and I just don't think that's the case.
Do you see that changing? I mean, is it something that people are more aware of? I mean, you mentioned technology, and
Yeah.
how complicated is it actually carrying like a large and heavy laptop with you on the train and then hopping on and off?
Yeah.
Is it something that we as companies, let's say, let's put now the company hat on.
Yeah.
What should we do as a company to make this experience more streamlined, more easy, more like enjoyable for the employee?
Yeah, I think, bringing them three departments together and really looking at the employee journey, right from onboarding, what information they provided, how they integrate into the culture, what technology do they need to do their role effectively. So I think it starts at the onboarding stage, and it shouldn't stop until the offboarding, and then it should still not stop until, you know, everybody is going, shaking hands like an adult and saying, we wish you well on your way. And I think that's the bit that too many organisations miss. It's got to be looking at each of them touch points as not just as a department or as an organisation, but get to the individual as well. And that's where the management and middle management come in and should really drive, you know, what people need. So understand the journey and ask why if you don't understand something.
You mentioned the role that the mid managers have. I think it's hyper important, and it's many times overlooked, or probably not by design, but by the way things are, right? So how can we improve that bit? I mean, is it something that we should train them on? We should give them more, I don't know, maybe more face time, because they should be aware of all this, right? And I would imagine they are.
Yeah. I feel like middle management is always that weird place of you've been promoted to middle management, but you're not good enough for senior management, and you're sat in this middle area waiting to be promoted to the more senior team, and you're always feeling in that strange place. Actually, I think and this is where, you know, things like the Peter Principle comes in, where people are then promoted beyond their means. So there are some really excellent people at middle management, and they go to senior management, and it's not the same tools, skills, traits that are needed. And it then goes wrong. And it's like, actually, we need to get more comfortable in organizations with saying middle management is crucial. And actually, there's nothing wrong with remaining in middle management, doing that really, really awesome job of connecting the people to what is going on at that strategic organizational level. And I think, you know, we need to start with a level of respect and more face time and listening, and understanding the viewpoint of the people. And I think that's a challenge at the moment, because it's skipping the middle management. It's kind of going from the employee wants to the business needs, and without the middle manager stepping in saying, well, this is actually how things are working, this is where we can improve things. And yeah, definitely more face time needed.
No, absolutely. You know, as you mentioned about middle management and how it's, you know, it's hyper important there. One of the most interesting and, you know, respected guys I worked with, you know, was like, whenever somebody wouldn't want to be promoted to a manager role or more senior role, was like, you know, that's absolutely fine. I mean, there are people who should be retiring as engineers. No, I mean, it's not like everybody has to retire from a C-level position, and that's absolutely fine. And I was like, for the first time I was hearing that, and I said, yeah, you're absolutely right, of course. Now, I was reading one of your articles on LinkedIn, and you mentioned this concept of seeking in the human brain and how it relates to the experience, right? And I think it's very well connected to the fact that, you know, we got to ask, and we got to give people the face time, and not only the mid managers, but kind of everybody. Would you elaborate a little bit? You know, how can organizations really tap into this aspect? Just, let's say, from the perspective of retaining more talent, because this is an important thing, right?
Yeah, I think what really really awoke my brain to this is I've got a friend who always looks for new houses. And I keep saying, are you looking to move house? It's like, no, I'm not looking to move house. Okay, so why are you looking? I just want to see what's there. I'm going, right. And when I was writing my book, it kind of, that thing kept popping into my head, and the human brain is always looking for something next. We're in a world where, you know, you can get a delivery from, you know, you can order something now and it can be with you before 10 p.m. We're in a world where our expectations are through the roof, and we probably just need to bring them back down a little bit again, and just be more content. But I think that human brain of seeking, we're always looking for what's next. And that's where the workplace experience comes in, because if people are always looking what's next and things are evolving, but organizations stand still, we've got a problem. And that's where the recruitment and retention comes in, because, you can go into an office that has not had any work done to it in 10 years, and you can tell that it's not had any work done for it in 10 years. And the person that comes into that office and looks at it and goes, this is not really somewhere I want to be, that's not going to recruit people into the organisation. And then from a retention point of view, if, they're in the workplace and they're going, oh, we're just content, we're just mumbling along, yeah, this is what work is. If the dynamics of the organisation and the technology outside of the organisation are changing, but then the organisation are not adopting it, again, the human brain is seeking, well, I know I can do something a lot easier than I'm currently doing it, but my organisation has not enabled me through the technology. I mean, you could take, let's say, like scheduling and desk booking. How many organisations right now don't have a tool to find where their people are and how to just book a space? And that for me is critical, because if you don't know where your people are, how are we going to kind of keep getting them moments of serendipity that we keep talking about? And okay, it's going to have to be slightly organised now because we're all very disparate. But we need to know and have a way of communicating where people are, instead of just putting a message out to whole company saying who's in the office today. So, it's things like that. And that's the expectations of employees.
Listening to your insights, I was thinking about this whole instant gratification thing that's going on in our lives. I mean, we have instant messages, instant delivery, instant everything, right? And I think this kind of translates somehow into instant expectations that companies have from you, right? No matter where you are, you should be doing this right now. And I think it kind of translates into a sort of, I don't know, maybe pressure. And technology plays a role, right? It kind of keeps you always on. It's like you're on duty all the time. What time is it? It's 8 o'clock. Oh, you should be out, right? Because you're not working from the office today. You should probably be already working from home. How do you achieve a balance here? I mean, we obviously have technology. What's its role, basically?
Yeah, I think one of the crucial things we need to educate the whole workforce on is the concept of like false prioritization, false urgency, because I think that's what creates that instant I need a response right now. Because just because someone's working from home and has got Teams on in the background doesn't mean that they are going to jump and respond to a message instantly because they're working. They're not just sat waiting for messages to come in. So I think there's a thing of calling it instant messenger is setting that expectation that it's instant. It gets delivered instant, but don't expect a response instantly. So I think, for me, technology allows us to work asynchronously, because we need to just reset our expectations. The technology is allowing us to get something out of our brain and await for somebody's response. And that's the expectation we need to start setting. I think, when there's all the talk around, let's say, CEOs that send emails to their employees at midnight and 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and how that creates basically a toxic workplace, because the employees then go, oh, they were working at that time, I now must also work at silly times as well. And I think that's where technology comes in. There's nothing wrong with somebody working at night, but delay send. Just send it in the morning when you know that your team are back online, because use the technology tools that are there to set the culture and the expectations in the organisation that, you get to switch off at night. They might not, because they're the CEO. That's part of the role, isn't it, sometimes? But, it's using the tech to signify to people that they're human, you care about them, and, it all kind of goes on from there. And it's something so small. It's out of your head, but it's not in the inbox of that person,
Absolutely. I was just reading about this CEO. I don't remember the company. Anyhow, he started getting all the C-levels on a meeting on Sunday evening because he wanted everybody up to speed and hit the ground running on Monday mornings. And I was like, exactly what you said. So that can't be good in the long run. I mean, you can do it if you like to. You're the CEO or the owner. I mean, whatever suits you, right?
Yeah,
But it can't be the same for everyone, right?
yeah, yeah,
But I like the, I like that very much, the explanation of how technology shapes culture there. But how about the office space right now? I mean, obviously the workplace has changed a little bit.
yeah.
What's the purpose of a place? You mentioned, these hypothetical uh, offices
Mm.
where they haven't been doing anything for the past 10 years.
Yeah, yeah,
What's the
yeah,
role of the office in the modern workplace, and
yeah.
what's its basically impact on creating that workplace experience overall?
Yeah. So, if that office hasn't evolved, and then hybrid working, new ways of working is coming to fruition, it's not enabling that to happen. So the technology has got to be the bridge between the way of working. And if you think, how does a modern workplace, play that part? If the modern workplace is not set up for people to do the roles that they're doing, let's take all of the designs that are coming out just slightly after the pandemic. It stripped away all of the physical desks in offices and basically said, you're here now just to collaborate. Well, who goes to an office just to collaborate? Like, we still have actual work to do where we need to be sat at a desk doing the thing that we're, to get us further along in our roles. So we need to have our spaces that are reflecting how diverse our job roles are. And that could be, I always talk about the C's, and, you could be concentrating, you could be contemplating, you could be creative, you could be communicating, you could be collaborating. It needs to get a balance of them spaces. And that's where, yes, technology comes in, but speaking to people and understanding the roles and the needs of the workplace. I know people that do go to the office to concentrate because they can't concentrate at home because they've got a puppy or a child, or something's going on at home. So actually, we need to take on board them individual expectations and experience needs as well.
Absolutely. I would add drilling machines to, whatever's keeping you from concentrating. And I think the
Yeah,
neighbors drill like millions of holes
yeah,
during these 2 or 3 years, and just
yeah, yeah,
adds to the noise, right?
yeah,
Um, but you mentioned technology as the bridge, as bridging this gap, right? What are some common areas where there is a gap between what the employees expect from their employers and from
mm,
their workplace experience and what
yeah.
they actually get?
Yeah, I think so. Interestingly, was I was at a family meal a few weeks ago, and one of my wife's cousins said, "Oh, we don't get coffee at work. We have to provide our own coffee." And I kind of like rolled my eyes. I was like, "You have to provide your own coffee?" She went, "Yeah, and milk." I was like, "Pardon?" Like, what? And I was like, I think being in the role that I'm in, I thought that wasn't a thing anymore. I thought that was just a given. And it's her first job into out of university. So her expectations are no different. And I said to her, like, what do you expect? And she went, well, I would expect coffee to be provided, but they don't. And you can almost feel that like disappointment from people. So there's a basic human thing of, we want, when we go to the workplace, we want toilets to be clean and functional and have toilet paper that's not like tracing paper. Them really small things that matter to people. You want coffee that's good. You want the technology in place that actually works. You want to be able to just spend time with your colleagues and go for lunch. What amenities are in the area? Because if you're in middle of nowhere and then your staff canteen is also rubbish, how do you expect people to eat food during the day and actually spend time with colleagues? And that's where you end up then with people sat at the desks eating the lunch. And that's not great for well-being. So there's all these small but really massive things that happen in the workplace that can massively change how people perceive and experience the workplace and the organization as a whole.
think that's a very valid point. I mean, we many times take things for granted, right? So they are part of it's like the laundry list. This must be done. So some
Yeah.
people, it's like when you put gas in a car because you need it to run, that's how people work on coffee, right? So I'm one
Yeah.
of those. I'm one of those. I'm very
Me too.
specific about my coffee. It's like without
Yeah.
it, things get weird.
Yeah.
But there are companies which obviously don't do that, and for them, it's not something that's probably understandable as a consequence that people get upset because of that, and it's really not a big deal, right? And if you're
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
middle of nowhere, there is no place around you where you can get some proper coffee from,
Yeah.
and it gets even more complicated, right?
Yeah.
So it's all about the humans, right? About the people.
Yeah.
What makes a workplace human centric?
Yeah. I think it starts with listening. It starts with taking the time to listen, and not just listen for listening's sake, but to actively listen, and to care about what happens next. Too many organisations listen, i.e., they get a survey filled in, and then they get the responses. They don't like what they see or what they read and what they hear, and then they kind of blame the people again. And it's really, part of my role is when I go into organizations, I'm saying, like, you almost can't see the wood for the trees. And let me uncover, what is going on under that car bonnet, because there's a lot going on that you're choosing to ignore. So for me, starting with that human-centric workplace is start by listening, and actually committing to improving things. Don't have it as just we'll change things if we have to. It's got to be, we need to change things because it's going to improve things for people. And, that comes into things like sickness days. It can obviously affect mental health, ergonomics, people with back pain 15 years after leaving a job because they didn't have the right technology and the right setup 15 years ago, and they've crippled the back. That's major. And yet organisations at the time think, we'll spend all this money on a fit out, but then we'll go and get some chairs from a well-known Nordic company, and we'll spend 50 quid on each chair because that'll be fine. And you go, well, no, because that's affecting people's back. They need that back for the rest of their lives. So, for me, that hitting them human needs, and you can go back to Maslow hierarchy needs, but getting them solid foundations in place, and going from there. And that starts with listening, belonging, feeling like you matter within the workplace.
Absolutely. I mean, there are some things that you obviously need to consider, right? So one of these mandatory, I think, things is actually caring about people's well-being. And I'm like speaking of the physical well-being. Having a rubbish chair, that's going to ruin every experience, right?
Yeah.
And there is no reason why you shouldn't get like the best things for the people, so they can put in the best effort and you can get reap those rewards eventually. But apart from this, let's call them hygiene things eventually. What others are non-negotiable when we are designing or creating this human-centric workplace? Because you have a lot of experience with transformations, right? With changes and designing them. And what are some things that necessarily have to be dropped?
Yeah. The elemental workplace is as relevant today as it is 6 years ago when the book was published. And you're looking at things like the element of choice. So people having a choice where to sit, what coffee to drink, where to go for lunch, how to work with their colleagues. Are they sat in a closed collaboration space, so like a meeting room with a door, or are they sat in a collaboration booth that's open? Just having them really small things around choice. So that for me is also that's a crucial element of the workplace kind of experience and journey. Other things obviously come into it, like connectivity. Of course, it's another hygiene factor. But when you're thinking, well, how do we create a workplace then where we're listening to people and we've kind of took needs on board? One thing that I always do is when we're looking at workplace design, we're looking at change, is not just by listening, because sometimes people can't necessarily communicate what doesn't work. So what I do is give them a Polaroid camera, and we go out in groups, Polaroid camera, keep that camera with you for the next couple of days. We're going to come back together in a few days and bring you photographs that you've taken. And it's what's working, what's not working. Because in that moment of something not working, they can just take a photograph of it. And if that's something that then impacts their experience, then that's when we can bring it into what matters for the people in the journeys.
So what are some common things that you find, in those photographs?
Yeah. So things like acoustics, desks being too close to the canteen or a collaboration space. So, and especially, with the increase of knowledge and awareness around neurodivergence, when we design in workplaces, we can't just have a quiet area next to a loud area. We've got to almost taper it so it's like a quiet, a medium, a loud, and then it gradually gets people used to the noise, and also using things like sound masking. So acoustics, massive one. The ergonomics, I've said, the technology, what's put into the workplace. So is a meeting room, for example, does it just have a light on it that says green, this is free, it's bookable, or anything, you just hop in there? Or is it something where there's a room there that looks like it should never be entered, and you don't know when it's free because no one's got access to see a calendar? That actually senior management go in there, and you think, well, is anybody allowed to use that room, or is it just the managers that are allowed to use that room? And this still happens every single day. So technology bringing that, setting the tone and the culture of the workplace, I think, is crucial, and connecting people that are working from home to people in the office. So when people are dialing into a call, are they just a silhouette on the screen and nobody even knows who's talking? Or does the camera lens move around the room and pick up people's faces and voices and go, this is an inclusive meeting because the technology is allowing us to do this? You don't need to be in the physical room. So again, all them. Decoration always comes into it, in the use of colour, which is always interesting. So we know from the psychology of colour, let's say red signifies anger, it signifies blood, and all of these things. The organisations that have got red on their branding will come to people and say, right, we want red walls. And you're going, no, you don't want red walls. You do not want people having associations with anger in the workplace. You can have touches of red, but you do not want a whole red wall. And it's just them simple things. Plants, if you're going to have plants in the office, make sure that you actually water them. Because if it's a dead plant in the office, it takes away every single impact that plant could even have. You're walking into an office and you're seeing a red wall and a dead plant. It's not a great start to the day.
Absolutely. I was just thinking, for some now, just listening to us would be, so now what? I need to water the plants even, right? So I put a plant there. I've done my part, right? So done and done.
Yeah.
But it's actually it's not very complicated, but it ain't easy as well, because you need to have a very good understanding of fine psychology, right? On how people react to certain things, to colors, to noise, to to how complicated their path is if they want to get somewhere where they should be going. So you need basically a designer for the interiors, right? And you need somebody who understands ergonomy. Is not just because I read a book about design and I'm a designer for workplaces. Then you need to understand, what people want, and that might change and might be different from company to company. Because if it's a call center, then they will have specific needs. If it's a development facility, entirely different. If it's like a research facility, then it's entirely different, right? But what amazes me many times is how people still, they have access to all the technology, but they still use something that they've been using like 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
The reasoning behind that, I don't know what it is. I don't want to comment on that, but truth be told, there are many solutions that can make it like super easy for everyone. In terms of change, what are the hurdles that you normally you find, when people come to you and say, yeah, I want to get to a more, let's say, human-centric approach. What should I do?
Yeah.
And then what's the barrier that they put in front of you?
Yeah. So I think one of the big issues from the beginning is they treat project management the same as change management. And they almost see it as these are the milestones in the project to that change. And actually, you've got to take that approach of, well, where are we now? We need to freeze that situation, understand that situation, and then we need to unfreeze that situation and go from the beginning. So the adoption, I do quite a lot of work around adoption of technology and the experience of technology. And the biggest issue really that goes wrong is people expecting people to start using something just because it's there. Unless you communicate the value to them, they're not going to use it. They've got to understand it, and it's got to have a purpose. It can't just be a gimmick. An example I always talk about is my nana. So she got some smart plugs connected to an Alexa, and she lives on her own, and it was Christmas time, and she told the Christmas lights to turn on, okay? And she was like, technology is brilliant these days. And I said, how does that impact you? Like, that plug, like, what she's 70 odd. How's things changed? She said, well, it means that I don't have to bend down under the Christmas tree, risk falling over, being found in the morning. And her head went somewhere where I didn't expect it to go to. She went, however, don't put it on the kettle, it's annoying. And I said, what do you mean on the kettle? And just what she'd said was that she'd used a smart plug on the kettle, and she kept saying, oh, I'm going to make a cup of tea, boil the kettle. But then she was like, but there were no water in the kettle. The smart plug can't fill it up. So I started laughing, and she said, and also, while I'm in the kitchen waiting for the kettle to boil, I might be washing up, I might be preparing tea. So actually, that isn't good for me to have a plug on the kettle. Now I thought, well, if my 70-odd-year-old nana can understand the concept of using technology for the benefit, and she's not a digital native, why are we struggling so much? Like, we can do so much better than this.
That's fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. Just adding stuff on the tech stack is probably not the best idea just because you can, right? We've seen this happening in the past where companies just buy something because it's the end of the year and they still have some budget, and they just buy something randomly or close to randomly, and then some people have to use it because we bought it, we paid for it, so now it needs to be used. But how it actually fits in the whole ecosystem, what problems it solves, that's somebody else's problem. It's not mine. Mine was just to buy these things, right? Now you deal with it because now it's yours. So how do you actually bridge, and here I'm also thinking about responsibility, right? So how do you bridge these processes? How do you put them and have like an experience end to end? So you have people buying stuff, and then you have IT people implementing it, and then you have people who should be using it, and sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. Is it a management thinking? Is it like a mindset thinking? What do you think?
I think there's an element of role modeling, obviously, from management. So, if it gets into, let's say, booking a desk, we know that a lot of organizations are not using the desk booking functionality that exists, even though we know that it will help them. Okay, so they don't use it. And that's because they know the manager comes in every day and sits in the same seat. So they're going, well, why can't I just do that? So there's an element there of role modeling, communication, what's in it for them, reinforcing positive behaviors. So, throughout the week, throughout the month, someone does something, you think, oh, they've used the technology how we expected and wanted them to use it. Talk to them about it. Go, how did you find that? Like, it almost solidifies what has just happened, because then they'll want to do it again. It's a little bit like throwing a ball for a dog. And when you stroke the dog and clap it when it comes back, it's going to want to go and get the ball again. So, if you take the human psychology, we've got a desire to meet, needs and expectations of other people and to please other people. So actually, it's up to the manager to let their team know that they're doing the right things, they're doing the right behaviours. Now, obviously, don't clap when they book a desk because that might be a little bit derogatory. But it's the concepts of it. Just say, does that help booking a desk? And we know it does. And if it doesn't, then that's where you can then go, oh, I wonder why, and then understand it, and then you can tweak the technology that you're doing. It might be that people want to book a desk 2 weeks at a time, and it's 2 weeks and it's the same desk. It might be someone needs to book a desk with 10 minutes notice. It's then understanding the rules around the technology. So, I think that positive reinforcement, the role modeling, and communicating the reasons why it's there. Like, we've done this to make your life easier. Or we've done this because you said you had a challenge with X, Y, Z. So understand why you're doing something. Because, people know when there's a bit of budget left, and things start appearing in the workplace in March and April because they need to use the budget up. Like, it's so obvious. And then people kind of go, well, I'm not doing it because they just did it because they wanted to use the budget up. It's putting them at the center of it. Like, we've done this for you, so use it.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the role modeling part, and just to take it a little bit further, there's this concept that I learned from one of our customers, really, and it's called beach toweling. And it's like, when people go to the swimming pool in the morning, like 7 a.m. or even earlier, and they throw some towels on the best swimming beds, what do you call them? The sunbeds. And then they go back to sleep, right? And when you go to the swimming pool, it's like 9 a.m. and all the best places are taken already. So that's beach toweling. And some people do this in the office, apparently. And with the proper technology, you can have rules in place to prevent that. And I think the most important thing to apply it to is management, right? So they shouldn't get the same things, the same places, the same seats over and over again, because it kind of defeats the purpose eventually. So if you want people to be able to move around, if I need to work with you on a project today, I want to sit next to you, obviously, right? And then if tomorrow I need to sit with another colleague and work on something, I should be able to be going at the other end of the room if that's the case. So it's fantastic, But I was thinking also about
think as well, like, do you know when someone's beach toweling, it's trying to understand the behavior, because people on holiday, let's say someone's on an all-inclusive holiday, they feel they've got a right, an entitlement to have the sunbed that they want to use. So there's an entitlement and a right there. If you transfer that to the office, we need to understand, why does somebody think that they've got a right to that space? Is it because they're connected to that space? They've had years of having a desk with a drawer that has got the biscuits and the cereal bar and the tomato ketchup in it, and they've got used to having a picture of the kids on the desk. And it's I've always had that, so why have I not got that anymore? So you've got to understand the right and try and detether them almost from the physical desk, and making them feel like they belong in the whole workplace, not just at that desk. Because, with activity-based working, it's not good for someone to just sit at a desk all day. We know that creativity changes when people change spaces. And obviously functional as well. People having a full-on meeting sat around a desk while other people are trying to concentrate, that's not good for anybody. So we've got to learn how to detether people. I'd love to do it on holiday at some point and just try and do a scientific experiment on how to detach people from their sunbeds, but I won't do that.
I don't know how that goes, because I'm really curious as a social experiment, how this turns out. But I mean, to your point, we are also creatures of habit, right? And presumably, if I've been working from the same desk for like 10 years and all of a sudden it's not mine anymore, I might have a reaction, right? If I don't understand, or if I'm not explained properly why did this happen, why I don't have it normal. So then I might have quite a forceful reaction and go obviously use the platform and book it for the next couple of weeks, no matter if I'm coming to the office or not. But then again, if I move from my office and I see somebody sitting in my desk and I'm like unable to focus and concentrate on my work because that one is sitting in my seat, on my desk, in my office, then it's gonna, a little bit of frustration is gonna build up there. It's a final process basically behind it, and of course one of the first things to do is to understand, why people do that, and maybe not social experiments, but close to. I mean, you should explain why things go. So communication, this kind of sounds like a mantra, really, and it's like obvious for everyone. Communication is key in change and transformation, but do we really do it properly? That's a big question. Now, we are all talking about the future of work, and the future of work is this, and the future of work is that, and then we have this and we have that. But how's the present of work looking? Because my feeling is that a lot of the things that we kind of project in the future as being part of the future of work are already here.
Yeah, I think there's people that are doing things now that the rest of the world are seeing this is the future of work. And actually it's here now. We don't know really what the future of work is. You can't say AI and things like ChatGPT are the future of work. It's happening right now. Organizations are using it right now. There was a study the other day and it said that like 64% of people surveyed had used a tool like ChatGPT in the last week at work without their manager even understanding and knowing that that's been done. Now, you're in marketing. Can you imagine if your marketing team were using ChatGPT to write all of your content and you didn't know? And actually it meant that it's not hitting, let's say it doesn't hit the needs of your people. It's too automated. You can see that it's ChatGPT, because I think you can tell it's ChatGPT.
Yeah.
But imagine you've got your people working from home. You're thinking, oh, well, they're working a 40-hour week. And actually they're using ChatGPT and doing their jobs in, let's say, 1 hour. Like, as a manager, we need to know that that's happening. And then you can actually understand the content and how that's been written and so on. It's not a bad thing. It's just that I don't think we can rely on it without the human touch also coming into it. So there's a time and a place for it, I'm going to say. Now, if you think, future of work, what is the future of work? We don't know, because our brains are limited to what we understand right now. So you could say flying cars and drones, but there are places where that exists already.
No, absolutely. But when you mentioned ChatGPT, I think it's kind of the extra member of so many departments these days. I mean, even if at the beginning many were reluctant or they didn't completely understand what it does or what the output is, I think they kind of learned to use it. I think it's fantastic. We're living in fantastic times, really. Who would have imagined that technology evolved at such a pace, and then we kind of have it at our fingertips. But also, it has a lot of ethical implications as well. And one of them is, of course, the extent to which you're using it in your job or whatever else. And of course, I would like to know if my people would do that, and use it all day long and said, boss, my job is done, tip top. There you go. That's fantastic. We got amazing content coming up. I would like to know if our extra member of the department was involved in delivering it. But it also kind of brings me. It gets me thinking. So we need companies to actually adjust, right, to the new way of working, including AI, including technology and everything else. But we also need people to adjust a little bit their behaviors, right, to the new reality. Is it something that you found very often, that companies understand that also people need to change a little bit when you go through this change process?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not an organization that transforms, it's the people. The organisation is not a thing that you can just transform. It's the people in the organisation. So you've got to take people along the journey, which starts with listening to what they need, what they expect, where their challenges are, what's working, what's not working, and almost understanding their future desired state to get there. So it's the people that we have to continually push to change, because otherwise nothing will change.
I think you just busted the myth when, organizational change is something that you hire somebody to do and they deliver something and then it's done. Are you telling me it's not that way?
No, I think, too many times, if I start working with an organisation, you can quite quickly see that they're not ready for change. And I will challenge them on that and kind of go, what am I here for? Because actually, you're not ready, committed to even making this change at a senior management level. So I'm going to go and work with the people. I'm going to get them on the road of change, and yet the manager's not changing. And then they're going to come up against all them hurdles day in, day out because the managers have not changed. So it starts at the top. And, when an organization's not mobilizing itself for change, nothing's changing. And they'll expect somebody external of the organization to come in and deliver the change management program and then, run out of the building afterwards and everything's done. It can't happen like that, because then all that's going to happen is you ring me back in 6 months' time and say, we've got another change that's needed. Change is constant. So actually, there's managed change, but then there's the small bits of change that are constant. So organizations need to understand how change happens and how it's role modeled and influenced. And it needs to be a continuous thing. And it needs to happen after the consultant's retainer's finished. It can't just be reliant on a consultant. And I know that kind of is a bit, probably a bit bonkers of a consultant that's on a retainer to say, but I feel like every bit of work that I do is done with integrity. And I know that if someone's not ready for the change, I'm not just going to take a purchase order off them and go, nice one, I'll just have a battle for the next 3 months getting this change to happen when I know it's not going to happen. It's not good for anybody. I kind of go, right, let's get the foundations ready first and then my work will start. Or my work can start now, but that's a separate project from the actual change project. We can do this stuff first. So I think there's an element of integrity when it comes into swooping in and, understanding how organizations work and what needs to be done.
No, absolutely. Speaking of change, one of the recent, or in some cases not so recent changes, is that they ask people to get back to work. The return to work, the dreaded return to work in some cases situation. And one of the reasons behind it is that we need people to be engaged. We need people to be engaged, so they need to be in the office because that's where they get engaged. Right? So what's your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that?
I think anybody saying that doesn't understand the levels of presenteeism that were happening before the pandemic. Just because people are sat in the physical office doesn't mean that they're working. In fact, it generally, it's probably most of the time it's the opposite. So actually there's so many distractions around, and we know, all the science, every time you get distracted, it takes you 15 minutes to get concentration back. Well, actually, if you think about an office, that's a lot of time wasted through just pure distractions. Never mind the fact that people want to talk about what they're watching on Netflix and get another coffee and all of them things that happen in a day to day. So actually stop treating people like a machine, but back to work. We've not stopped working. Most of us, unless we were furloughed, we worked all the way through the pandemic, and the world didn't fall apart from a work point of view. There was other challenges, obviously, but from a work point of view, the work got done. So surely that should signify to people, to organisations, that work can be done. The majority of work can be done anywhere. Obviously, there's certain roles that can't. If it's a landscape gardener, they can't work from home, obviously, unless they're going to have their own beautiful garden. But there's an element of, really, if we're going to say return to office, it's an office mandate because we want to improve engagement. If anything, that's going to infect engagement because, like I said earlier, people need and want choice. and it's about trust. And actually, if someone looked at my diary and said, you're going to go into the office on a Tuesday and a Thursday next week, that's when I want you in the office, without understanding that actually Tuesdays I usually spend some time writing a report and concentrating and doing something that I just want to work from home on a Tuesday, because I know that I was in the office actually on a Monday, but they didn't force me to go in on a Monday, but that was my choice to go in on a Monday. So there's all of these things at play that are happening, and we can't mandate to people get to the office on XYZ day. Like, that's not going to be good in the long run for anybody.
No, I agree completely. But then there is a question, how do you actually increase engagement in the current situation, in the current setup, right? Which is more hybrid than anything.
Yeah, I think it goes back to purpose and meaning, and knowing that you're playing a part in what the organisation is trying to achieve. It's about your connections with your friends at work, connections with your colleagues. Like, one thing I think that was really obvious during the pandemic was all of the people that we work with day in, day out. That was extreme. We was working with them online, talking to them every single day. We was in their houses. We were seeing their kids, their pets. Our tight-knit circle got even tighter. Whereas the people in the office that you would only see now and again, you didn't see them at all because you had no reason to speak to them. So actually, the strong ties got stronger. The weaker ties just became non-existent. So now when you're talking about the office and improving engagement, we need to see that we're part of something bigger. It can't just be we're just working in this team of 4 doing this small thing here. You need to understand what's happening before it gets to you and further down the line in the organisation, and how it impacts your colleagues. And we know that people. I've got a friend at work have more engagement. We know that people will work harder. We know that if a friend at work says to you, I'm sorry, I know it's 5:00 on a Friday, but I really need your help with something. Can you help me? You will go, of course, no worries. I can do another half an hour. Don't worry, I'll come and sit with you. If that was somebody at work that you didn't get on with, you didn't like, you'd probably go, no, I've got to go, sorry. So we know that actually engagement relates to who you're working with and what you're working on, and if you care as well. So it goes back to the purpose bit.
Absolutely, and I think it's kind of part of a larger conversation which deals with culture, because you're talking about the mission, right? And I think one of the acknowledgements that we need to have prior to discussing the whole engagement part is agency, right? So me as an employee, and what's my purpose there? Obviously, it's not my purpose to speak with everyone and anyone in the company, or at least it shouldn't be, right? Unless I'm, I don't know, somebody from HR which has to do the one-on-ones or something. But otherwise, I play my part, I play my role. I need to be connected with the results. And I'm not just talking about KPIs, right? I need to see what's coming out of my hands, as if I was a stonemason, right? So here's the brick. There you go. Take it, put it in the cathedral and everything else. And there must be a sense of connection to the output and the outcomes of my work and my departments and my companies eventually. And this probably has very little to do with the walls of an office eventually. And but getting back a little bit to the engagement part, so I think it really ties up with what we discussed at the beginning with the middle management, right? Because big chunk of their role is to actually have these sort of conversations and underline these and emphasize these results and the roles and the expectations in such a way that they understand, that people, your team understands how they are part of the whole thingy and how they are connected to the end results eventually. So it might be a management thingy overall.
Yeah. It is. It's communicating the top purpose of the business to how it impacts and how that person drives that forward. So it's how is that person playing a part, and actually the middle management is crucial in understanding that and communicating that. and bringing things to life upwards and downwards in the organisation. So they play a really crucial part of being a connector in the organisation.
No, absolutely. And I was just thinking, because my background is in big companies normally, and I was thinking about when we had meetings, and meetings on different levels, and then all hands of deck sort of meetings, and then happenings where everybody got together, and I kind of missed that during the pandemics, right? Because there are sort of connections that you make, and you have a different type of interaction. You mentioned, speaking about, whatever everyone is watching on Netflix, for instance, and that's part of culture as well. Because in some places you cannot speak about what you're watching on Netflix, or you can't laugh about stuff, or it kind of depends on the specific culture. But in many other places, this is part of the how things are going. It's not necessarily the small talk just for the sake of small talk, but it's like the small bricks that you put on the foundation of everything basically that happens in a company. And I think also here, many of the tech tools that we have play a significant role, because you need to substitute whatever you miss on not having coffee together on the balcony or on the terrace at work, because you're having it in your kitchen or on your own terrace. And you can't just turn on Zoom and say, hey, let's everyone get a coffee together right now, because you can, but it probably won't have the expected result.
No. And there's always, how many times did we try that during the pandemic, and there'll always be someone that's still doing emails in the background, or a little bit distracted, or doesn't turn the camera on, or so there's so many things that play a part into that. And there's a lot of power in getting people together, seeing people, the whites of people's eyes, and just being with them, building connections, having discussions, talking about things that are not just transactional work stuff, like the Netflix. It's about building connection, and you're forming, it's going back to how our brains are wired. It's about a tribe. If you know that someone's watching the same program on Netflix as you, you're going, oh, they're part of my tribe. Your brain is signifying they are like you because they're doing the same activity as you.
Of course. And I think this is something that we should all keep in mind, that these things need to happen still. No matter where we're working from. It's something that we as social beings need to have. The feeling of belonging to smaller tribes, bigger tribes, I don't know. But definitely. No, fantastic. It's been a fantastic talk, Simone. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been really good.
Absolutely. And, as things change along the way, I'd love to have you on the show again.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like changing at a fast pace, but then going really slow at the same time. It's really interesting at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see how the future of work looks like in a couple of years, right?
Yeah, definitely. See you there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for being with us today.